Hey, it's your CEO, Weekend Gabe, and thanks for watching Weekend at Gabe's. We hope that you enjoyed this latest episode. While you're here, hit the subscribe button and follow us on YouTube. Thanks for watching.
All right. Oh, well, damn it. Might as well go with it, Sam.
Yeah, welcome. God damn it. Welcome to an interview that we were really supposed to have 2 weeks ago, but Restream fucked it up. So here we are today presenting you Thursday Thunnies, a segment that really, really, really needs a new title. And we have Weekend Gabe. I am the real Sam Crane, and this is Weekend at Gabe's. And who do we have today? Weekend Gabe.
We got one of the best comedians that I've ever come across, a friend of the show, Tim Barnes. When I was asking him, I'm like, who you think would be a really great fit for Thursday Thunnies and Weekend at Gabe's? He said Skyler Higley. This was over the summer, and this is right before we went on a bit of a hiatus. And I was like, all right, cool, I'll circle back. And I had hit him up, and I think he was busy in his schedule. I'm like, that's cool. We'll roundabout when we come back in the fall. But then I saw him at the Laugh Factory with Vic Pania, Pania, yeah. And they were both on the, sharing the stage together. This is during the weekend of my wife's birthday, and we were out at Laugh Factory. And Skyler absolutely killed, and I was like, I got to get him on the show. So, like I said, been about 2 weeks. We've been consistent, persistent, determined to make sure this happened for you, the watcher, the listener, wherever you're consuming this. We made sure that this happened, and here we are tonight. So, without further ado, it is a pleasure to introduce the Weekend at Gabe, Skyler Higley, for Thursday Thunnies. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm glad we finally were able to make this happen.
I am too. So glad too, because as I told you while we were fumbling our way through the first interview, easily one of the funniest dudes that we've ever experienced here on this show. Maybe the only competition is either Vic Pandia or Tim Barnes.
Not a presser. I'm gonna take down Vic. I'll tell you that. I'm gonna take Vic down. Take him all the way down.
You have to watch the Vic episode because it was so good. Because he was just moving into his very fancy high-rise condo apartment somewhere in downtown Chicago, and he's like, "Oh, poor me! I don't have internet that I can be next to." But then behind him is this glaring, beautiful skyline. I was like, "Oh, I feel so sorry for you, Vic. My apologies for your poverty right now of not having internet set up in your condo apartment." So you have a lot of room that you have to fill in.
Yeah, he could just stand to be knocked down a peg. I think why not? Beautiful apartment, beautiful guy, beautiful suits,
incredibly handsome. I think of my wife when my wife met him outside the show at the Laugh Factory. He came out after the first show and he was moving his car, and I could just see like the hearts like pumping out of my wife's eyes. I'm like, yo, dog, step back. It's too much.
Vic, go inside. Get out of here. Get out.
You're gonna break up a happy home. Go move your car.
Anyway,
But Scott, go ahead.
I just wanted to touch on the Laugh Factory since we're on the Laugh Factory. One of these, part of the research was watching all these videos that you have online and on TikTok and everywhere. But one of the things you said to me backstage before we started the interview was you wished you had more control of the content that was out there. Now, this is like obviously something that doesn't affect artists because they are in full control of whatever music video that they put out or whatever. But the artistry from a comedian, you almost have no control over what is your legacy, as it were, or at least your online footprint. Can you speak a little bit about that before we get into some other stuff?
Yeah, I will say that phenomenon is getting better. I just put out a video with Zanies that they asked me, hey, can we put out this clip? We think this clip's going to do really well. And then I said yes, and then it was like one of those collaboration posts. So, and it is doing really well. So that person was very correct. I don't know who the social media person is, but it's getting a lot better now. Places tend to typically ask you if you want to put a clip up, or you get to put out your own clip. So you do have a relative amount of control. The thing was back in the day, and by back in the day I mean maybe 3-4 years ago. The Laugh Factory, which it was helpful, so I have no qualms over this, would just like put out certain clips that it's like, hey, you're in this clip, and put it out. Then they started asking for approval. So it's really like, it's not that you don't have control. That's not necessarily the reason why I don't like it now. It's just that those old early ones, you can see clips of me up on the Laugh Factory from 1 to 2 years into doing stand-up. And that was an incredible opportunity for me, and it definitely got me things. But the thing that I don't like about it is now you go to look it up and you type in Skyler Higley and then you see these clips from Laugh Factory, and I'm like a different comedian now. So it is not as much of an accurate reflection of where I'm at stage-wise or who I am on stage.
Sure.
You could see me just like stumbling through words and not knowing how to really be a stand-up comedian yet. And I just don't like that that's something that people have access to. But I leave it up as long as like people know that that's really not me anymore. The problem is people don't. They go, I watch your YouTubes, and I go, nah, those are probably bad. Those are probably not what is good about the way I do things. So yeah.
I hear you. Yes. So we talked about that, and you do many other things outside of stand-up, and I think this is maybe what you were alluding to when you said that you didn't say you were worse back then, but you were green back then, shall we say? And
I can say worse back then. Sure. I mean, green is worse. That's just what it is.
Fair enough. Your words, not mine, because I still find all this stuff hilarious. But you've moved into a space now, or maybe a space a few years ago, where you're doing sketch comedy now, and YouTube sketch comedy with Problemagic. Talk about the differences between, writing a stand-up set or preparing for a stand-up set versus creating YouTube content.
Yeah, it's very interesting how different the things are, and I feel like I need them emotionally for different reasons. Because anytime I'm feeling really not, it's not that I'm ever not happy with stand-up, but when I'm feeling like the grind of it, or just kind of feeling the sort of repetitiveness, I can run back to the YouTube stuff, and it's a very gratifying experience. I think the biggest difference between stand-up and making those sketches is just collaboration. Stand-up, I'm always just completely by myself, and it's me and the audience, and it's a joke, and it works or doesn't, and I fix it, and then I come back. Whereas with sketches and everything, it's a lot more multidimensional. You're talking about the script as well as what kind of shots you're going to get and how it should sound, and like the editing and pacing of the whole thing, and like the start and the end. So there's that, and then I talk with, my friend and co-writer Nick Ogle, also a comedian, and the director of the sketches, Bailey Picorni, who shoots everything and makes it look really good. And so it's going back and forth, and there's a lot of different layers to the process. You write it, then you shoot it, then you edit it, and then you're like, I don't like this, so you edit it again, and then it's finished. So yeah, I think that in some ways it is a lot more gratifying for me, because it's like making a little film, and it's like there's a sense of finitude about it. You do it and then you put it out and then it's done. Whereas with stand-up, like, who's to say when a joke is done? Who's to say when I'm done with any of, like, it's just a process of like, you see a joke, and as an audience member, you might see it and think, oh, that's really funny, that must be done. It's like, well, that's what it was for that night, but that's going to evolve. Where those YouTube things, you make sure they're completely polished and done, because they don't evolve after you've put them out online. They're just online for consumption. So I would say those are the big differences for me.
Yeah. Well, what about? I'm glad you mentioned that because there's like a number of videos that are out there that you have where you tell this joke and then you sort of evolve it through these different sort of chambers. Where, like, for example, you have this wonderful video about talking about milk and how it's like elitist, and then it sort of goes into a racist component. It's like sort of channels through all these different sort of cylinders of thought. And then, but it's like you said, it's like it's never really done. Like the joke itself can carry on in sort of different factions. How when you're writing writing or sort of fleshing out the idea of just milk in itself, like how are you thinking about how the audience will react to something that's funny, but then sort of carrying it through another part or a portal of thought, and then like the audience sort of reacting to that. They're like, oh my god, I thought it was already done, but here you are continuing an idea. What take us into that sort of writing process or thought process of doing that?
Ooh, well, it's a good question. I don't know if I think about it quite in the same way as it's being phrased, as taking it through different realms of thought. I mean, I agree that is exactly what I'm doing, but I'm not consciously going like, okay, so I'm at this part of it and I'm going here. What it is more just like I thought of a new angle to this bit. I thought of another reason why I don't like milk or what has happened, and it's just something that came up. So then it becomes, after that point, then it becomes like putting together, like, okay, this part is going to move into this phase because I have another point to make, and then I have another point to make, and then it's just what makes the joke feel done. I could just talk about how I'm lactose intolerant. There's kind of stuff there, but really, if you start digging into that, it really is just a bunch of poop jokes, which I don't want to do. But
Right.
not looking down on it. It's just, it is what it is. If I drink milk, I'm gonna shit. That's just the thing. And I didn't want to keep talking about all the ways. And I'm like, because that's pretty surface level. So then it's like, okay, the next thing is like, the milk is so popular though. And that's why I personally struggled with not drinking it or not knowing that I shouldn't drink it, because I spent so much time drinking it because it's so popular and ubiquitous in culture. So I'm like, okay, why is it that? What's the weird version of that? And then there's the got milk thing, which is a very specific ad campaign, at least in my memory, of being like, this was everywhere. And
They
why?
had Shrek on one of those posters, and it said "Body by Milk." I remember that as a kid in school. What does that even fucking mean?
Right. And so it really is that specific premise is just like and it's a newer joke, I will say. So that's a good example of one that's not done, because I'm still tinkering with the ins and outs of it. But that specific premise is one of those that, like, it starts at me and my experience with it, and then it goes to society. There's like this personal thing, and there's this macro thing that I just like. I started there, and I started thinking about it more and more. And there's like stuff where you can go from like society to yourself, where it's like things are like this. This is how it affects me. Or you can go like, oh, there's this thing about me, and then going into this thing about me, I realize some of this stuff about society, and that is what takes these like different cylinders of thought, as you say, where it goes from here to here to here to here until like we're at this most absurd point of like me just doing this like conspiracy theorist type thing, and that is just like, how do I cap off the bit and what's really funny, you know?
Yeah. I hear you. Well, we brought you on here to talk about your latest project, and I would call it a comedy album, but it is also at the very same time musical, which I thought was interesting how you phrased that last question is like, as much as it's different cylinders of thoughts, it's also pacing, right? Because you can't move from one room to another too fast. And we talked with comedians before about sort of, you know, the pacing and the nuts and bolts of comedy, what makes something funny. Coming across Saltwater, I just thought it was this really unique thing, because I've heard sort of a spoken word album before set to music, and that's one thing. I've heard comedy albums before that have no music on them at all. They're pretty much just ripped from the stand-up set, which is also great, but also not my cup of tea. But you've married these two. And before we get into Saltwater and this product that you have today, I went a long way back in your Instagram, and I found a certain evolution from a project that you were working on called Sick Boys way back in the day.
Sure. Yeah, that was just a that was just a show, but yeah, like a live. That was my first show I ever did. Wow, you did do a deep dive. That's good.
That's what we do here. But I noticed this like this evolution from Six Boys to stand up to Problemagic and now Saltwater. Talk about just marrying what seems to be like a love of music and rhythm with this love of comedy.
Yeah, well, my thing is, I always feel a musical impulse. I always think to myself, I would be good at music if I ever sat down to do it. And yet I know a minimum amount, like, functionally about music. I can do chords on the guitar. I can kind of do scales. I can do some chords on the piano. But I don't really know. I know a tiny sliver of a bit about music theory, but I don't really know music that much. And yet, as with I think a lot of people probably, I still have a lot of just sort of musical things that come to my mind, or just like I really like music and I would like the ability to make it. I think I would be good at it. I feel like I have a natural sense of something unique and what I like and different rhythms and stuff. And I think it is a very significant part of just aesthetic, just sonically, that is, every single piece of entertainment has music in it. I mean, comedy doesn't traditionally that much, but you see that changing too. And so, yeah, I always just felt I have sort of these creative visions that are like a little bit more complex and can't just be stand up. Like that's why I like doing those YouTube things too, because it's like the comedy element is just sort of one part of it where there's all this stuff built around it. And so it was just me and my friend Nick Welch, who we've been friends since college. We are very different people and very similar people, and in very interesting ways. And we always just end up talking about, we don't do it so much anymore. I think we've kind of put the period on the this conversation, but we always get into talking about the similarities and differences between comedy and music. And I would talk about an experience I had with being on stage or doing something, and then he would talk about an experience and he goes, that's interesting because in comedy this happens, but in music this happens. And it's just like I can just conjure up a certain amount of chords and you can be feeling something just right away, because that's just how emotion sounds. Whereas with comedy you have to like manufacture that emotion and then like put a punchline on it. So it just was a project that came from us always wanting to do that. We actually had done a version of it called Bits and Pieces that we just released on SoundCloud like years ago. That was more of just like my open mic set to just like kind of music that he was making. And we just figured what we should do is just a bigger, better version of it and see how good it could come out. And that's what we did. Yeah.
Just to button up the album a little bit and segue into another part of your comedy is that you have a song called Godcast, and where God checks in and he says, God says capitalism isn't the best way to go. But it made me wonder, because you infuse religion and your history with Mormonism into your sets a lot. You talk about it. But then you kind of have like sort of this agnostic approach, or atheist. I'm not really sure where you fall into that, but you talk about it openly. But then you have this bit on there, God checks in, and then also I dug up this quote from it's from Chicago Creatives. This is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where they ask you like if there was a special guest to join sort of your improv show that you guys were doing. You said Jesus. So
So I don't know what that was or what I said, but yeah, okay.
they asked you like who would your dream guest be, and you said Jesus, but comedian wise Dave Chappelle. But so what is your relationship with God or Jesus or in general? Like where I think it's kind of curious. Like where do you fall on the fence of this?
Everybody knows the funniest things to talk about are religion. So let's preface that with this.
It's funny because I didn't really have, it's something that I'm going through more now even. I didn't even really have a perception that like religion or talking about it was taboo. Because I was raised Mormon, it wasn't taboo because that's all anybody was talking about and everybody agreed on all the points that you would make about it, just everybody around, you know? So I think that is sort of why even outside of that and having left the church, I never even considered it taboo, where more and more now I'm encountering like I'm submitting for like to do stand up on late night or something. They're like, yeah, we can't do any of these religion jokes. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess people get uncomfortable with that. It's just not something I've ever been uncomfortable with. But like as far as like my relationship to God, like I don't know, I went through phases where I was deeply, deeply religious. I was so hardcore Mormon. And that ended. And then I went through my atheist phase that was a lot more like scientific and atheist. And it's that kind of thing is fun for me, but not necessarily like, I think you end up discounting a lot of things. And now I'm sort of in a place, I guess for lack of a better term, agnostic, where I've done a certain amount of psychedelics and I've seen a certain amount of things. And on one level, I can go, those things are a result of neurons firing and creating hallucinations that are representative of symbol systems that I know from my mind, from the way that I've grown up in culture and society. Or there is some fifth dimensional version of me out there, and he's looking down at me and shooting thoughts at me through a magical special cube. I don't know which is true. So that's kind of where I'm at now, where I'm like, I don't know, whatever anybody wants to believe is, as long as it's not regressive, is okay. I just find it all like funny. It just existence is absurd anyway, like it's already funny. So religion is absurd just because like it's just absurd, and I don't have any like problem with people being that, but I just find it funny on its face. I think that Jesus Christ is a very funny idea to me.
Hey man, I appreciate that. That was well put. You mentioned submitting the jokes for late night and then being like, no, you can't use this. This is too much of a religious joke. I just, people talk about writers' rooms all the time. You know, we had Tim Barnes on here to talk about his experience working entirely remote in a writer's room during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. But we don't really get like a look inside. And not to, hash too much of your time on Conan, but take us inside that writing room experience. What is like a day in the life of you? Is it just you pitching stuff and getting shot down like a lot? Is that just...
No, I mean, that what I was referencing for the late night stuff for me was just like doing a late night set of stand-up. I mean, you get shot down at any writing job a good amount, and some people more than others if you're just like ready to pitch. I did not feel shot down a lot, or I mean shot down is even the wrong way to put it. Just certain ideas just don't go all the way don't go all the way through. But I felt like my Conan experience was great. I had a good time of like I was coming from The Onion at the time. I was a fellow at The Onion, and we had to generate so many headlines and ideas and like write so many things and pitch so many things that going to Conan over the pandemic, I was like, all right, so like, what's the requirement? What do we want me to do? And my boss, Matt O'Brien, was like, yeah, so just pitch like 1 to 2 ideas per meeting if you have them. And I was like, 1 to 2 ideas? I'm expected to write like 10 headlines per meeting in these other one. Like, what do you mean 1 to 2 ideas? Yeah, and then it was really like, it was really casual and really fun. Like, we would get into the writer's room. We'd do a lot of just like talking and BSing because it was over the pandemic. So everybody just needed to be social. They just wanted to talk and hang out. So it was a lot of that. And then we'd read off the ideas. And then if we liked them, everybody would kind of riff on them and laugh. And then the ideas get passed on to Conan. And if he likes it, he's like, let's try this. And then what would really happen is you get your idea greenlit in the morning meeting. You just start working with all these different departments, trying to produce it and trying to figure out how the bit's going to work and casting and graphics and doing all that kind of stuff. So that was the experience there. It was really, I feel it's like a survivor's guilt because I'm like, I know everybody had a very hard pandemic. I had the most fun job in the world and I was getting paid a very good amount of money to do it. Even though I was like alone and whatever, like everybody else. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also working for my hero in comedy, in a fun way. And he's also like, you hear about these comedians that are famous and are actually assholes, and Conan is not that. He's the real deal and a good guy.
Awesome. All right. Before we get out of here, I had to. It's going to take a little while for me to get through this question, so I want you to hang tight. But I really want your thought on this. So there's a couple things. One, I heard on it was the Team Coco podcast that you did, like I guess shortly after you started, and they were just kind of like asking you about your background, talking a little bit about who you are, how you got started, etc. And you were telling the story about how you were at The Onion, and that sometimes like you need that safety net. Sort of someone in the room, like you were talking about, like sort of summer 2020, George Floyd, and how like there's things that you can't say because you got to read the room, and that some things aren't just funny to say at that time, and but then you kind of like I don't know if you said on the podcast or somewhere else, but then you were like when you were in high school, and I think it was you were in the debate club or you're running for some sort of student council president or whatever, and then you told a North Korea joke. And then you also told the student body that if they didn't vote for you, that they're racist.
Yeah.
So how do you are you looking for a safety net now starting this part of your career so you don't end up out there in the ocean by yourself? Or who is it there to like sort of reel you in so that you don't go out too far and you're like, yeah, people aren't ready for that?
Don't say Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Phrased that way, I guess I've always been a little shit. I don't know. Well, also the funny thing about that is my reputation up until that point was that like I was like a sweet kid, and then like part of the thing was that I just went up and said all this like wild stuff. I think that I am maybe someone who, I don't want to like only be defined by this, but I do think that I have a certain like level of anti-establishment or disruption in me, either from leaving Mormonism or just having like a certain type of relationship with parents and a church, whatever, where whatever is like the dominant sort of like structure, I always want to sort of say things to kind of upset that or just talk about just what's weird about it. As far as like going too far out, like once you start to have jobs and stuff and writing jobs, like they'll do that for you. It's like built in. That's the nature of comedy jobs, is where they take all these funny people and then they go, all right, now be as funny as you can with what you're allowed to say on this platform. And that's just kind of how it goes. There are certain things that I had in certain Conan bits that got cut out that I was like, I really think that should be in there though. And they go, well, your name's not the show. It's a Conan show, and Conan thinks that it should come out, and I go, okay, but I do think it would be funny, but that's completely fair.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and then as far as stand-up is concerned, you kind of can't really go too far, or the audience will tell you. Like, the audience tells you when it's, like, not working. You know, there's that whole thing about, like, going up to the line or whatever. And, like, the audience can feel it in people's response. And I don't want to be somebody who's just, like, upsetting people, and I don't really think that's how... I'm not one of these people that is just, like, trying to shock for shock humor's sake. My most shocking joke is actually a very personal joke that I just find an absurd thing, where I'm talking about the fact that, you know, I'm adopted, I don't know my real mom, my fear of finding my real mom is that what if she's really hot? Like, that's very shocking, and people can sometimes go, whoa, hold on. But I'm like, I also like to go, like, it's also very obvious that I'm like, yeah, I'm, like, joking. Like, everybody, let's relax. I don't really mean that at all, obviously. I don't mean for harm to come to anybody. I think people's problem is they take so many things at, like, exactly face value. Like, me telling everybody if they didn't vote for me, they're racist. I didn't believe that. But, like, but I still got in trouble for it because they were like, you can't say things like that to the... And I'm like, but why? Like, nobody thinks I'm serious, and even if they do, that's, like, very silly. So, like, whatever. And also, like, I don't know, I still care about the laugh more than any of the exact implications to exactly what I said. That's sort of the problem that you have online now, is people will go like, well, you said this, but what you ignored was this, this, and this. And it's like, I don't care. Come on. We're all trying to have fun. You don't seem fun, you know?
This is what it comes down to, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Real quick, I just wanted to get into 2 quick fun questions before we get you out of here. Everybody was up in arms about The Little Mermaid being Chloe Bailey. And you were up in arms about the casting as well, but in a very different way. Sebastian will be played by Chet Hanks in this movie. Quick fire, as in Whitefish Summer. Quick fire answer. If you had to recast that role, who would be Sebastian?
Who would be Sebastian in that role? Oh my gosh. Terry Crews. I think that would be very funny. It'd be a very funny role. Unless we wanted to go like really white, like that would be funny too if we went really white and made it like Michael Cera or something.
I was just about to say Michael Cera. When you said really white, there was only one face.
Yeah, exactly. The most white. I will say though, I did like the person who's actually going to be, just for the sake of, if any listeners don't know, it's actually going to be Daveed Diggs, and I just edited that to be Chet Hanks because I thought it was funny.
Word. Well, you got me. I thought that was real research, and
that's the game, baby.
Yeah, at the Onion, that is definitely the game, right? At a certain point. Really quick, what Disney movie would you love to see in live action?
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to say Mulan, but they already botched that. They already kind of
just a better Mulan, would that
like
be
a good, because the animated one was so good, and then they just did the live. The thing is though, I don't really care for any of these live. I think I love animation. I think all these movies are way better in animated than they are doing in live action. So I'm like, why do you keep doing it? Maybe no. I can't think of one that I really want to see. They just kind of seem to be doing them. So
word. No, I hear you. I definitely hear you. And final thing, and I'm glad that we did this interview before Halloween. We saw the hot dog costume from 2015 as we were diving deep into your Instagram. What's your Halloween fit this year, Skyler? What do you got for us?
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I don't know anymore because I saw Kanye wearing that White Lives Matter sweater, and I was like, that's so funny. I'm going to do Kanye White Lives Matter and have a little hat because it's like, that's hilarious to me. And then it started getting not funny.
Not funny, yeah.
Now he's like out there doing like, and I'm like, Well, now I don't want to be him as a joke because it's just not funny now. But I was thinking maybe. Ooh, here's one I just floated the other day. It's Spike Lee, so I'll have the glasses and the hat, but then
Okay.
Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, and I could be Spike Lee Spiegel and have the outfit and the glasses and hat. And I'm like, it's the ultimate black outfit. It's Spike Lee plus anime. Black people love anime. Perfect.
I love it. That's great. Send pics. Send pics for sure.
I got one really last question, then we'll get out of here. I promise. All right. Per the Chicago Creatives article that cited you as saying Jesus is your dream guest to have. They also asked you what was the craziest place you ever done stand up. You said at a Puerto Rican restaurant that ended up turning into a bar fight, and then they ended up kicking you out. 2 questions: will you ever come back to a Puerto Rican restaurant to do stand up? And what is your favorite Puerto Rican cuisine?
I don't know if I can name a Puerto Rican cuisine off the top of my head. Like, I don't know. I haven't had enough Puerto Rican food, I'll be honest. And
well, then you should come over, Skyler. I'm just saying.
Hey, man, if you want me to come over, I will have dinner, dude. I'm not joking. I do love it. I just can't name any. I'm like, oh, this is all great. What is this? I don't know. I'll eat it. Just whatever, man. But as far as going back to a Puerto Rican restaurant to do stand-up, I mean, I'd have to be paid well. That show was literally like the first year of my stand-up, and it was just like, no hate against Puerto Rican restaurants. I just typically don't want to do stand-up in a restaurant unless it's like a well put together show, which ours was not.
That's, that definitely is the bottom. All right. All right.
The fight was the most exciting. Like, that was the most like, oh, now this is cool. This is a terrible show. This is not working.
Like, oh, the real entertainment has arrived. I will step to the side. All right. Well, Skyler, thank you so much for joining us here on our Thursday Thunnies on Weekend at Gabe's. We appreciate you so much for giving us your time. Please go follow Skyler on all the socials and YouTube and go see him live. Where's your next show going to be at, really quickly?
My next show is going to be at Color Club. I'll be opening for Ashley Ray.
Dude, spectacular venue. That place is awesome.
Yeah, and that's going to be a great show. So everybody come out to that.
Go spy him. You're amazing with us and then on stage as well. Thank you so much, Skyler, for joining us here on Weekend at Gabe's.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching this latest episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. If you're looking for more, click on any of the episodes swirling around my head. And also, don't forget to follow us on the socials at Weekend Gabe, at Weekend at Gabe's, and also at The Real Sam Crane. All right, thanks for watching, y'all.